Hello everyone, welcome to the PMP exam question and answers practice session for December. So just like the previous months, we would be solving 5 medium to high difficulty level PMP exam style questions today in this video. And for each of the 5 questions, we would be doing a detailed explanation on the correct and the incorrect answer choices. The intent of this exercise is firstly to test how well you are prepared for the PMP exam. So for example, you can use this scorecard that you see on screen to test your performance across the 5 questions. And secondly, the goal of this exercise is to develop your understanding on the correct process and strategy for solving PMP exam questions efficiently. So please give this video a like and let's get started with question number 1.
Right, so question number 1, guys, the drill will remain the same as per the previous months. Please read the question and try to solve it before we take this together. Right, so let's get started. A recent accessibility mandate requires detailed screen reader descriptions for all user interface elements, but the mobile application's current framework has memory constraints that prevent embedding extensive metadata directly. Now, the accessibility guidelines do not specify an implementation approach. So the Agile team proposes to address this limitation by implementing dynamic descriptions that load from an external service. And the deployment of the updated application and the project's upcoming release milestone is planned to commence in the next 5 days. So basically what has happened in this scenario is it's an agile project and there is an accessibility mandate which requires detailed screen reader descriptions. Okay, this is exactly how sort of a mobile application behaves if you are not able to view the application due to some kind of constraints in your vision, right? And this is basically making that application accessible to vision impaired people as well. Okay, now the problem that has happened is the guidelines of accessibility for this product does not specify an implementation approach. Okay, but the agile team, they have come up with something of their own, okay, as a proposed solution, which is to address this limitation by implementing dynamic descriptions that load from an external service. Okay, now the question is, what should the agile team do next in context that the deployment of this application is planned to commence in the next 5 days. Okay, so option A, incorporate the accessibility description feature into the sprint backlog as an additional requirement. Okay, possibly you can sort of shortlist this option, okay, in your first sort of review, and you can say that, okay, since I know the requirements, I have formulated a way in which I will be able to match these requirements, and option A takes care of that. Fair enough, let's hold this option for now. Let's look at option B, engage the accessibility team to validate whether the proposed technical approach meets the requirements. Okay, so basically it's asking you to do a sense check, okay, because as a project team, you are not really the owner of the accessibility requirements, right? There is an entire stakeholder group whom you need to align before you propose any solution, okay, and that is quite critical. So option B also looks like a plausible option. Let's look at option C, obtain authorization from the steering committee before implementing the solution. It's a bit too far-fetched, right? Steering committee is a committee which sits generally at a program or a portfolio level, and for such specific feature approvals, it really doesn't go to the steering committee directly. Okay, it might go to your product owner. Escalations might go to your project sponsor. Okay, so option C is incorrect because it's the wrong path of escalation. Let's look at option D, create a working prototype and present it to the accessibility testing vendor for verification. Okay, this is also incorrect, right? Because the vendor will be executing whatever you provide, okay, or whatever the stakeholders provide as part of the feature. They can test it and say that whether it's doable or not. But again, the question is the prototype feature which has to be vetted by the vendor first or by the accessibility team first, because they are the primary stakeholders of that feature once it's rolls out to the vision impaired people, right? And that is why option D is also incorrect. So we are stuck between option A and option B. Now, if you look closely, option A suggests that you incorporate this description into the sprint backlog straight away as an additional requirement, okay? And this is an incorrect answer choice, guys, okay? And the primary reason is because without vetting the suitability of the proposed solution that you have been proposing as part of this overall scenario, you as the project manager, you are not authorized to include that as part of the sprint backlog. Because what happens if you have done everything and sort of everything has gone into the product has been prepared and it's ready for launch, and suddenly the accessibility team says that, you know what, this is something which we don't agree, and we are the subject matter experts for this kind of features which needs to be included as part of the application, and without our approval this feature is not going into the market. So then you are stuck, right? And that is why the correct answer to this question is option B, which is to engage the accessibility team first to validate whether whatever you have proposed, and they might as well say yes, but they might say that, okay, you do X, but you do Y on top of it. Okay, it is X plus Y. So it's extremely important for you to understand that if you go directly to option A, you are sort of bypassing a key stakeholder group in terms of decision making, and that is a red flag in terms of the PMI way of project management. Okay, so option A is a very close answer choice, guys, but it's an incorrect answer choice, and the correct answer to this question is option B, which is to engage the accessibility team to validate whether the proposed technical approach meets the requirements, and once that is done, then you can go back and execute option A. Okay, so the correct answer is option B.
Now, if you are preparing for the PMP exam, I would suggest that you check out my PMP exam preparation courses on Udemy. All the courses are very highly rated amongst the students, and many PMP exam aspirants have passed their PMP exams with the help of these courses. You can check the reviews on Udemy, and all the relevant links will be provided in the description section of this video. And now let's move on to question number 2.
Right, so question number 2, guys, please try to solve this question yourself. You can pause the video here if you wish to. Okay, so let's get started. In a sprint retrospective meeting, development team members raises concerns that defects are increasing due to what appears to be excessive workload pressure. Okay, now the key term here is what appears. Okay, so it is what the team thinks, but until and unless you do a proper root causing and fact finding, you can't pinpoint that basically is this the cause of this defects which are increasing. Okay, it is a opinion, okay, but it may not be the fact. So how should the project manager respond to this? Let's look at the options. Option A, consider implementing a Kanban board for reviews. Totally random, right? Because Kanban boards are for progress update or progress review meetings, and sort of it doesn't make sense or gets into proper context with respect to this problem versus solution approach which the scenario is proposing, right? So why Kanban board? I can say why not information radiators. Okay, so there is no head or tail to this option, so option A is incorrect. Let's look at option B. Mandate that the development team members adopt strict time boxing or spikes. Possibly. Okay, so you can do time boxing if you sort of are delayed in terms of developing a user story, or you can do spike if you are sort of trying to brainstorm and come to a proper solution in terms of how to address a specific backlog or a sprint item, right? So B is a plausible option. Okay, so let's park option B for now. Let's look at option C. Substitute the less productive team members. Okay, random, right? You can't really do that. I hope you don't do this in real life as well when you are faced with such a scenario. Let's look at option D. Investigate to identify whether this relates to scheduling or quality control issues. That is also a really good option, and that goes back to what I was discussing at the very beginning when I was reading the scenario, that what appears to be excessive workload pressure. So you don't know, guys, right? So you don't know whether this workload pressure is really the reason, or is something related to scheduling which is causing the problem, or is it something related to quality control? So basically what you are trying to do is you are trying to find the root cause. Okay, because if you have not arrived at the root cause, how will you propose a solution? Because for example, if it is a scheduling issue, yes, time boxing is something that you can definitely do. If it is quality control and you are trying to brainstorm and identify that, okay, why the quality is getting missed again and again, you can do a spike as well. But until and unless you know that whether this is related to scheduling or quality control, you can't really sort of say that, okay, I will do time boxing or I will do spikes, right? So that is a very, very strong reason why option B falls out and option D becomes the correct answer choice. Okay, However, there is a very interesting item that I would also like to let you know here as part of this question, that if you look at option B, you will see a couple of very strong superlative words. Okay, first one is mandate. Okay, and the second one is strict, and that is why when I do these Q&A sessions with you, I always recommend that you read the question and the answer options word by word. Okay, so both of these options, mandate and strict, these are very, very strong superlatives, guys. Okay, and when these kind of superlatives are sort of juxtaposed within your answer option, your alarm bells should start ringing. Okay, because generally if you have these kind of superlatives as part of your answer option, they are generally incorrect. Okay, because see, in project management nothing is a mandate. Okay, everything is a guideline, so you need to understand that nobody can pull you to court just because you have done time boxing instead of spike, or if you haven't done either time boxing or spike. Okay, you are not sort of punishable by law, so it is not a mandate. Okay, also adopting strict time boxing. Okay, why strict? Okay, so it is, again, it's a very strong way of putting something in front of you as a candidate for the PMP exam. So be aware of these strong superlative words in your PMP exam whilst you are evaluating the answer options, because more often these kind of answer choices are incorrect. But having said that, answer option B is also incorrect because it is actually jumping into the solution without addressing the root cause, as we have discussed before. Okay, so answer option B is incorrect. It was a very close answer choice, but it's an incorrect answer choice because of the reasons that we have discussed, and the correct answer to this question is option D.
Now, before we move on to question number 3, guys, I would like to introduce you to my PMP exam study group on YouTube. It's a monthly subscription based membership model, and you will get daily posts on highly nuanced tips and tricks to prepare for your PMP exam, which are generally not discussed on my YouTube videos. You can try it out for a few months and cancel anytime if you wish. Feedback from students for this study group has been excellent.
Right, so question number 3, guys, the drill will remain the same. Please read the question and try to solve it before we take this together. You can pause the video here if you wish to. Right, so let's get started. An organization is implementing a digital transformation initiative with deployments across regional offices in 15 countries worldwide. The Program Management Office of the PMO seeks enhanced real-time visibility into the project status and improved knowledge transfer among project managers operating across multiple time zones and geographic locations. Okay, now 2 things PMO is asking from you. Okay, one is real-time visibility. Okay, that's item number 1 which PMO is seeking, and secondly, improved knowledge transfer. So these are your 2 sort of asks from PMO, and which 2 agile practices would best address this requirement? And it is also saying that you have to select 2 answer choices. So it is a very sort of 1:1 mapping, that one of the answer choices should give you the real-time visibility which the PMO is asking, and the other answer choice would give you the improved knowledge transfer which the PMO is asking for. Okay, so let's look at the options one by one. Option A, definition of done, incorrect. Okay, because definition of done is basically a scope refinement or a scope definition tool. It is not linked to real-time visibility, or it is not linked to improved knowledge transfer. Let's look at option B, digital Kanban board. Yes, this is a correct answer choice because it is linked to real-time visibility. So when you have a digital Kanban board, it is sort of real-time and you can sort of update it, and it is best because it's digital and it can have equal accessibility across 15 countries worldwide, right? So it's a very good answer choice. So option B takes into account the real-time visibility aspect which the PMO is asking for. Okay, option C, backlog refinement, incorrect, because again, backlog refinement is a scope definition or a scope refinement process. It is directly not related either to real-time visibility or to improved knowledge transfer. Okay, let's look at option D, remote daily stand-up meetings. Again, that is also incorrect because daily stand-up meetings are what? They are basically direction setting meetings which looks at the last 24 hours of performance and plans for the next 24-hour performance. Okay, and identifies top 3 or 4 critical risks that needs to be addressed over the next 24 hours. So it's a definitely a real-time visibility. Okay, because you might say that, okay, I'm looking at last 24 hours, looking forward for the next 24 hours, etc., etc. But you have to understand that when PMO asks for a real-time visibility, they are not really interested into your day-to-day project management, right? So look at this from a PMO standpoint. And many of you who are thinking that D might be a correct answer choice, you need to lift yourself above from your project management shoes or your project manager shoes and look at the project from a PMO or a portfolio level. Do you really care that, okay, what the project manager is discussing in the daily stand-up meetings? Because you have like 50 projects to take care, right? So these daily stand-up meetings are least of your worries if you are part of the program or the portfolio management team, right? So when you say real-time visibility, of course, digital Kanban board works because it gives you the progress update, right? It gives you the tasks that are in progress. It gives you the tasks that are waiting to be picked up. It gives you the tasks that have been moved to the next department, right? That's how digital Kanban boards work. So that is why option D is a very close answer choice, but it is incorrect. And the other correct answer choice would be option E, which is the bi-weekly retrospective, because this directly takes into account this knowledge sharing or the knowledge transfer criteria. Because in retrospective, you actually do this, you do these knowledge sharing and you build systemic fixes so that these kind of issues doesn't really happen in the future projects, and your other project management teams can learn through this retrospective learnings. Okay, so that is why option E is a correct answer choice. So the correct answer to this question is option B and option E, and that gives you your couple of answer choices which are correct as part of this overall question. So this is a multi-select question, guys, and in your PMP exam, to get awarded the full marks for this question, you have to select both the answer choices. You can't have like a 50% allocation where you select one answer choice correct and the other answer choice incorrect. Then the question will be overall marked as incorrect. Okay, so if you have to get full marks for this question, you need to select both the correct answer choices. Okay, so the correct answer to this question is option B and option E.
And now let's move on to question number 4.
Right, so question number 4, guys, please read the question and try to solve it before we take this together. You can pause the video here if you wish to. Fine, let's get started. Multiple development teams are building separate modules for an integrated software platform. The modules have significant interdependencies between them. The team leads express concern that the integration issues might arise when the deliverables from the different teams are merged. Okay, so for example, this is one team who is working on a deliverable. This is another team who is working on another deliverable. This is another team who is working on, let's say, the third deliverable. Okay, and these are all having like interlinkages or interdependencies between them. Okay, now the concern of the team leader is that when these deliverables are ready and when they are combined into the final product, there might be inconsistencies in the final product. Okay, and that might primarily be if these teams are not talking to each other and if they are working in silos and they are sort of delivering what they are supposed to deliver individually. Okay, then there might be problems with synergies when these items are combined into the final product. Okay, and that is something that we can infer as part of the scenario that has been presented to us in this question. Okay, so the STEM asks that what recommendation should the project manager provide to the team leader. Okay, so let's look at the options one by one. Option A, detect potential integration issues and establish a recurring coordination session with the representatives from all teams to track progress and dependencies. Okay, that's quite a nice option, and it is exactly reflecting what we discussed here, that if these three individual teams are not talking to each other and if they are working in silos, then it is bound to happen that when these deliverables are combined, there is a mismatch. Okay, and there is a loss of synergy. Okay, so option A looks like a plausible correct option, but let's look at option B, C, and D as well. Okay, so option B, determine priority sequencing for team deliverables, then postpone activities from the remaining teams to prevent integration conflicts. It is a bit random, right? Because you can't really postpone activities from the remaining teams just out of assumption that okay, this might be okay to postpone that. Okay, now you can still do a priority sequencing. Okay, and the question might be then, okay, how long will you postpone? Okay, this option might have been a better option if it was structured as and then restructure or rearrange the activities from the remaining teams. Okay, not postpone. Okay, so you can restructure, rearrange, juggle the priorities. No harm in doing that, but you can't like just postpone. Okay, then postpone for how long? Okay, then the question stays open. So another learning as part of this question, so when you are evaluating answer choices in your PMP exam, take into account and be careful of these kind of words which comes with a strong negative connotation, okay, which is postpone, which is cancel, which is deprioritize, those kind of stuff. Okay, so option B is an incorrect answer choice. Let's look at option C. Record the integration issues as they emerge and implement corrective actions to address any challenges that develop. That is also incorrect, and that is primarily because this is a very reactive way of problem solving, and PMI, as you know, always advocates a proactive way of problem solving. Okay, because if you are recording the integration issues as they are emerging and then you are implementing the corrective actions, it is a very reactive approach as a project manager, and that is not something that is recommended. So option C is also incorrect. Let's look at option D. Direct all the teams to maintain parallel development activities, acknowledging that integration conflicts can be resolved during the testing phase. Again, this is a blunder to make, because what essentially you are telling or instructing the teams to do here is, okay, go at your own free will and we will take care of what problems happen at the testing phase. Okay, and this is also a very reactive way of problem solving, because you are not taking proactive actions to sort of identify the risks early on before the product even move on to the testing phase. Okay, so option D is also incorrect. So the correct answer to this question is option A. Okay, and that is to detect the potential integration issues and solve the challenges of communication between these team members at a very early stage, even before that becomes a problem, and that will happen through coordination sessions and having a non-siloed working between the teams, which option A actually suggests. And option B was a very close answer choice, but it is incorrect, primarily because of this negative term of postpone without any reasoning. Okay, and that is why answer option B is incorrect, and the correct answer is option A.
And finally, let's move on to question number 5. Remember, the target is to get all the 5 out of the 5 questions correct, okay? However, the minimum expectation is that you will get at least 4 out of the 5 questions correct to consider yourself fairly well prepared for your PMP exam. You can assess your level of preparation according to this scorecard. So, here comes question number 5.
Alright, so question number 5, the drill will remain the same. Please pause the video and try to solve the question before we take this together. Right, so let's get started. Our project manager is preparing the agenda and the documentation for an initial project launch session that will include stakeholders from multiple international locations. How can the project manager enhance and maximize stakeholder engagement? Okay, so the key term here is multiple international locations, which definitely, as you know, comes with the different time zones. Okay, so how can the project manager enhance and maximize stakeholder engagement? What you are trying to solve here in this question, you are trying to identify a technique which will maximize stakeholder engagement. Okay, so that is the key for you to understand before you even go and look at the options. What is the problem you are trying to address? Okay, so let's look at the option one by one. Option A, develop the presentation content for launch session covering stakeholder participation strategies. Random. Okay, this is incorrect, because that doesn't anyway provides confidence that this will ensure maximum stakeholder engagement, right? So why will the stakeholders feel engaged? Because you have developed the presentation content for launch and covering stakeholder participation strategies. Okay, this might be useful for the audience, because how will the stakeholders know that what is expected of them until and unless on the day of the presentation they see your slide and they wonder that, oh, okay, was this expected of me? Okay, that's interesting, right? So that is why option A is incorrect, right? So let's look at option B. Survey stakeholders for their availability and scheduling preferences to address geographic time zone differences. That is a really good option, because it is technically addressing this multiple stakeholder location, and it is also addressing how to maximize stakeholder engagement, because if you take into account the time zones and the availability and the scheduling preferences, you are bound to maximize stakeholder engagement, right? It is no rocket science. So option B seems like the correct answer choice. However, let's look at option C as well. Confirm attendance or representation from all essential participants prior to the session. Okay, that is also incorrect. They can still confirm the attendance, but they might not turn up. Okay, and also it is equally important for you to understand that essential participants, yes, they are part of your stakeholder groups. However, very critical, participation is not equivalent to engagement, right? So a person can still participate and be silent throughout the entire session, and there is zero engagement from that participant, even if he or she is present in the event, right? So the bottom line is attendance is very, very different from engagement. Just because you are attending and sort of participating in a session doesn't mean that you are necessarily engaging in that session, right? I hope you understand that. So option C is also incorrect. Let's look at option D. Evaluate the launch session agenda and documentation for comprehensiveness and clarity. It is again a redundant activity you can still do, but it will not directly sort of justify that why just because you are evaluating the launch session agenda and documentation, it will increase or maximize stakeholder engagement. Okay, so it's standalone, it is fine. Okay, there is no problems with that. To evaluate the agenda and calibrate it before you are actually going into the presentation or into the review. But you have to understand, going back to the original discussions that we were having, that what is the problem statement this question is looking for to solve. Okay, and it is looking to solve the stakeholder engagement criteria and to maximize the same. Okay, and the correct answer to this question is option B, which is to survey the stakeholders for their availability and scheduling preferences to address the geographic time zones, because that is bound to take into account the multiple location issue, okay, as part of the question. And it is definitely maximizing stakeholder engagement, because if they are attending the event during their preferred slots and time zones or according to their scheduling preferences, it is assumed that they will participate. Okay, and after some point it is also beyond your hands as a project manager to ensure participation, but at least you can make infrastructure conducive enough for the stakeholders to participate, and that is done by choosing option B, which is the correct answer choice to this question.
I hope you liked the session, guys. Please press the like button and subscribe to this channel if you really found this session helpful for your PMP exam preparation. Also, do not get demotivated if you have scored less, okay? Remember, the key is to analyze and learn from your mistakes and course correct now, so that you do not get caught out during the actual PMP exam, okay? Thank you for watching, and I will see you again in the next video.